Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive Western Suburbs podcast, quarterfinal review, semifinal preview. It's Tuesday afternoon. I'm Josh Welge, joined here by Joel Boenitz. He's back from Bloomington Normal, a long weekend there. Joel, are you refreshed and ready to talk some football?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, great week of covering volleyball last week, but I'm very ready to be back talking about football now.
Absolutely, and a lot to talk about. We had a great weekend of football last week. A lot of our local teams did quite well this past weekend, which sets up a really exciting semifinal weekend. And Joel, I think I've got to start with the game that I was at Saturday, Batavia Downers Grove North. I think at least one of us said last week, even though our Friday Night Drive pick was Downers Grove North, don't bet against Batavia. I know you said it. I think Sue said it, and I totally agreed. And I think we were all right to be that we were wrong, because Batavia came out and really with a very impressive win. The final score was 17-7. I don't think it's really indicative of how they controlled that game. And they did it, they're playing the two quarterbacks now. They're rotating them within the same series, in and out. I don't know how they do that with an offensive coordinator and do it as well as they're doing, but they're playing both quarterbacks, getting the ball to, I think they threw the ball to 6 different receivers. They even had Grayson Kelly had a wildcat on a few different occasions. But when it's all said and done, they won the way teams win a lot this time of year. They won it because they could run the ball and they could play really good defense. Nathan Whitwell ran the ball 40 times for, I think, about 158 yards. Really controlled the clock, controlled possession. I think they had double the amount of plays that Downers Grove North did. Nathan, he never really broke like a long one, but it was 3 yards here, 4 yards here, 6 yards here. And then when the quarterbacks, when Michael Vander Leeuwenhoek needed to make a play, he had made a couple of big plays. Bodie Anderson did as well. They were able to get the lead and play with the lead. And again, it was 17-7, but I thought they really controlled the game. Nathan Whitwell on the ground, and then their defense was just tremendous. Downers Grove North only had 17 yards rushing. Downers Grove North has a really good quarterback, Owen Lansu, going to Minnesota. But they really made things difficult for him. I mean, the defensive lineman, Malachi Smith, Xavier Blankwell, really pressuring him a lot. And then that back line of the Batavia defense, Chase Osborne, 5'9", 165 pounds. But, man, the kid is just all over the field. I think he had 13 tackles or something in their second-round win, and he was great again late for them. Just a really impressive performance all around by the Batavia team. Their defense actually pitched a shutout. Downers Grove North's offense, their only points of the game came on a pick 6 in the second quarter. Other than that, they didn't score. So really great performance by Batavia all around.
Yeah, it was just a
Good classic football game, I guess you could say. Very defensive centric in a game that had offenses that could very easily could have gone off for a lot of stuff, but obviously it was it was a lower game, and that's something we've seen throughout the playoffs, is that we've seen some of these teams kind of pull off these kind of low scoring wins, and I think it's really indicative of how talented these types of teams are. I mean, we've obviously talked about Batavia's defense throughout the entire year and how great they've been this year. And Matt Holmes' plan for that defense worked tremendously for them. They said they wanted to put pressure on Owen Lansu early, and it worked perfectly. I mean, they forced him into that interception earlier in the game with from that Jake Feller got, and it led to the field goal that made it 17-7, and it just worked perfectly for them. And it shows. And whenever I talked to Dennis Piron throughout the year, he told me that this team's going to build up to be a really great football team. And if you told me at the beginning of the year that this Batavia team was going to take down, Downers Grove North and make it to the state semifinals, I would have been, I would have questioned it a little bit. But the way that the team has progressed throughout this entire year, from using Nathan Whitwell a lot, from using the dual quarterbacks of Bodie Anderson and Michael Vander Leeuwenhoek, to the defense just coming into their own. They've really developed into a really good team. And there's a reason that they're in the state semifinals again for the third straight year. And, the defense really proved that, they deserve to be there this year.
It's always impressive when you could see it's a sign of a good program is when you see him week 1 and you see him. Okay, I saw him week 12 that they looked so much better, and they certainly did. I mean, I saw him week 1 against Glenbard West, a win, a very good win, but they looked like a much more better dynamic team that can do a lot of different things predicated with their defense and their running game. And I tell you what, people don't pick against Batavia very often, but they were picked against last week, not only by us. I think there was some sort of an online poll that Downers Grove North got the majority of the picks. And there was a healthy chip on the shoulder on the Batavia side with about a minute left. The game was in hand. They all pulled out these like sheets of paper with an online poll on them. And they were all displaying it. And it was like they were like holding like a newspaper or something that they were all reading. And they were pretty fired up about that. Now their coaches didn't want them to bring that in the handshake line afterwards, which they did not, but then they took a picture with it afterwards. So I think they relish the underdog role, which they're not in very often. So a very good win for them going into the semifinals. Another very good win Saturday for a Duquesne Conference team, Geneva, with a game that I thought was kind of a game that could go both ways, and it didn't turn out that way. Really dominated that game with Lake Forest. They did it with their defense and their special teams. I think they forced 5 turnovers. And again, they recovered 2 onside kicks. How often does that happen? They've recovered 3 onside kicks in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, 3 in a row,
dare say. Or no, 9 in a row. My bad. But, it's still really impressive to have 3 onside kicks, over the span of 2 games and have all of them go in your way. I mean, it's something that you don't see a lot at any level. And, they didn't really have, an onside kick throughout the majority of the season. I mean, Jaden Hodgson, their kicker, he would have a couple of, chip shots that would, go to the 30-yard line that would mess up teams. And, it would go in their favor a lot, but they never had, an onside kick that went their way. So to see them pull it off back-to-back kickoffs, just to start the game. I mean, they had 3 straight offensive drives before Lake Forest even got the football on the offensive side. So, they just really controlled that game. And, the defense, talked about 5 turnovers. It's the most turnovers that they've had in a game since 2019 2020 against St. Charles East, where they had 4 interceptions and 1 forced fumble, which was exactly what happened here. But, it was a really good game of complementary football, which was the word that I saw a lot in the story that was written about them. Because, I mean, we obviously knew the offense was good and that it would help them out a lot in this game. But the fact that the defense was able to, stop Lake Forest, get turnovers in Lake Forest territory to, get them great field position. I mean, it just shows how much, the defense has also grown throughout the entire year. And I think it's a really good momentum setter, especially against a team like Cary Grove next week. I mean, Geneva's going to be making their first state semifinal since 2008, which is also the year that they were runner-up in state. So, there's a lot of momentum on their shoulders. And the only question is going to be, are they going to push it forward, heading into this week?
Yeah, no, very good win for them and really good sign to not only their offense, but their defense and their special teams. I mean, how good must that onside kick be? You knew that it was on the scouting report after what they did against Burlington, and yet they still were able to recover 2 of them. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. I couldn't believe it when Chris Casey texted me that they had recovered 2 onside kicks. It was just amazing. So, great win for Geneva. They're in the semifinals. Hats off to them. Going up to 8A, a program that, I tell you what, once the playoffs have started, it seems like a switch has been flipped. I'm talking about York. I mean, they're a team. They had a really good regular season. They were 7-2, but they also had 2 kind of late second half of the season losses to Lions and Downers Grove North. That kind of made me wonder, do they have another long playoff run in? I mean, I picked them to lose their first round game to Edwardsville. I think I picked them to lose their second round game to Oswego. I did not pick them to lose last Friday, and they did not. They have just turned it on offensively, led by Bruno Masso, their senior quarterback, great running quarterback. He was well over 100 yards for the 3rd straight week. I mean, Warren was never in that game. I think it was 24-0 in the blink of an eye. And I think it was something crazy like 27-0 at halftime. I mean, they really dominated a good Warren team. And again, a game that I thought was going to be close and it wasn't. So very impressive for them. And York is in the semifinals for the third straight year, which is impressive in that, I mean, they Mike Fitzgerald, really good coach that really kind of turned that program around. He left to go to Marist. Don Gelsomino, his defensive coordinator, takes over. And the fact that they were able to not miss a beat, continue what they did. I think I read in the story that after, like the day after Mike Fitzgerald left, there was something crazy, like 150 kids in the weight room. So they bought in. It wasn't just like, hey, we felt sorry for our program that we lost a really good coach. They were ready to go, and they're back in the semifinals. And I think they have a really good chance to go even further this time. We'll talk about that later. So York, a very good win. Dropping down into 5A, a couple matchups between CCL, ESCC games against Interstate 8. And the one I'll start with, I think, Joel, you and I talked about it on the phone earlier today. St. Francis and Sycamore, if you would have told me it was a 10-0 game, I'm not sure if I would have liked St. Francis' chances before last week, because I really like their offense and they play a lot of high-scoring games. But, man, that St. Francis defense stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the podcast last week, and I said that this was going to be a game against, an unstoppable force in St. Francis's offense and an immovable object in Sycamore's defense. Sycamore's defense ended up winning that contest, but I don't think anybody expected for St. Francis's defense to outperform Sycamore in that feat. I mean, it was the first shutout for Sycamore since 2019 when they lost in week 2 to DeKalb 13-0. I mean, it was a super impressive showing from St. Francis. The defense just, completely shut down their offense for the most part. Sycamore had a couple of missed opportunities to get points on the board. I think they missed a couple of field goals in there. But I mean, either way, to keep them out of the end zone is not a feat that hasn't been done in a long time. And for St. Francis to pull this off, it's a super impressive victory for them.
Yeah, good sign for them. I mean, similar to Geneva, showing that, I mean, everybody knows about Geneva's got a great offense. Everybody knows St. Francis has a good offense. But the fact that their defenses can come along and contribute the way they did, that's a really good sign for both those teams going into really tough semifinal matchups of this weekend that we'll touch on later. It was a really good weekend, Joel, for our sort of local CCL, ESCC teams. Obviously, St. Francis, we mentioned one. Nazareth, sort of as expected. Nothing against Rochelle, but I kind of wondered if they had seen a team like Nazareth, what they can do offensively and defensively. And Nazareth really kind of controlled that game. Logan Malachek, another, threw for over 200 yards. I think Rochelle really didn't do anything offensively. So Nazareth rolls. They've really not been challenged through 3 playoff games. They've really been quite impressive in 3 playoff games so far. I think that'll change this weekend. And then Montini, I kind of wondered Montini going on the road against Princeton after they had beaten Byron in a very emotional second round game, how they were going to respond to that, because they had played Princeton the year before. So you knew that Princeton was going to be kind of fired up for that game. And it was a close game. I believe it was a tie game late in the half. But then we talked about it before. Izzy Abrahams, their sophomore quarterback, the way their offense has taken off in the second half of the season. He made a really big play at the end of the half. I think he scrambled and he threw it to Santino Florio for a touchdown. I believe it was on the last play of the half. And that kind of, Montini kind of took off from there. So a very good win for Montini in a tough environment. I mean, going on the road, long drive to Princeton, playing a team. Princeton's a team with a lot of playoff experience to be able to get that win. That's a quality win for Montini.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we mentioned it coming off of, their win against Byron last week. It was, are they going to be able to keep that momentum up? Because, obviously, whenever you face a team like them, sometimes you might, look down the competition. But surely enough, they didn't do that. Israel Abrams, obviously, playing really well, throughout the game. And, they're back in the state semifinals again.
Yeah, and we'll look to that now. I mean, we have a full slate. I think we have 5 semifinal games involving teams from the Western Suburbs and a lot of rematches, to be honest with you. And I guess we got to start with that St. Francis Nazareth game that's going to be Saturday at LaGrange Park. I feel like I read somewhere that St. Francis has been in the semifinals, like, and they've gone to Nazareth like 3 times in the last several years. They're probably sick of that road trip for the playoffs. But St. Francis, I mean, Nazareth has won the last 2 state championships, and they've had a lot of success the last decade or so. St. Francis under Bob McMillan, they've been on to come. They've they're on really a program on the rise, but that semifinal hurdle is one they have not quite been able to overcome yet. They've lost the last couple of years in the semifinals, I believe. But this is a really good opportunity for them. They obviously beat Nazareth in week 9. That was a game that Brady Palmer, took a late hit early in that game, came back and brought St. Francis back. So I don't know. That's a really exciting one between 2 teams that I think there's a little bit of a chippiness on both sides.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, obviously, last year, heading into the state semifinal matchup between these 2 programs, St. Francis won their game in week 9 over Nazareth, and then Nazareth came back and, basically said, what happened in the regular season doesn't matter, beat them, and then went on to win the state championship. So there is definitely going to be a little bit of chippiness in this game. But I think, for St. Francis, getting that 10-0 win over Sycamore is definitely a big confidence booster that, hey, we can stop a really good offense if we need to. So, that's definitely got to be a good confidence booster for them. They obviously, Brady Palmer, we talk about him a whole lot. We talk about the wide receivers and Zach Washington and Ian Willis. Washington, of course, being a first-team All-Stater this year. It's going to be a really good contest one again. I'm not going to be surprised if it's as close, if not closer, maybe even a 1-point game decided by a 2-point conversion. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens this time around. But I expect, once again, for it to be a high-scoring game with, lots of points scored. We've said it a couple of times. I'll say it this time. There will be points scored in this game.
I feel very confident that there will be points scored in this game, barring if there's like a blizzard Friday night, Saturday morning, and there's not able to, or 80-mile-per-hour winds or something crazy than that. Barring weather, I'll be very surprised if this is not a high-scoring game. And man, I mean, they faced each other 3 times in the last. This would be the 4th time in the last 2 years. It could all 3 of the previous games could have gone either way. I mean, they were very close. High-scoring games, all of them. Similar to Batavia, I don't like betting against Nazareth this time of year because they got the track record. But St. Francis, the motivation's pretty clear. I mean, Nazareth beat them last year in the semis. They've been in the semis the last few years, haven't been able to get over the hurdle. I think the last time they went to state was 2008. So they really want this one. It should be a lot of fun on Saturday. I'm looking forward to it. Another rematch, Geneva Cary Grove. Cary Grove handled them pretty well last year. 41-7, but I think Geneva's got a little bit something in them this week. For one thing, the games of Geneva, they got to like that.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. I mean, they have had their 1 loss at home this year, but of course, having the home field advantage is definitely a great thing, especially in the playoffs. And we talked about the blowout last year. When I was talking to these players throughout the season, there were a couple of times where Tony Chihino, their quarterback, would be talking to us like, hey, that game last year, that woke something up in us. That's, part of the motivation of why we want to be so good this year. And to the game with only 1 loss. So, they definitely want to get revenge from last year's game against them. It's definitely going to be tough, especially, considering Cary Grove is once again really good. But I feel like this year, especially throughout the playoffs, they haven't been challenged throughout most of the playoffs. I mean, all 3 of their games, they've scored over 40 points and they have held their opponents to just singular digits. And, it's been that way for, a lot of the latter half of the season, the only exception being, their 44-43 victory over Huntley. So, they did show that they do have, some things that can be worked around on the offensive side, but for the most part, they've been really good this year. And, I just think it's going to be a really good battle. And even if Geneva doesn't win, it's going to be a lot closer than it was last year.
What is impressive about Cary Grove too is that they lost their All-State fullback Logan Abrams. He was an All-State fullback for them last year, and they just have not missed a beat. I mean, they've dominated all three of their playoff opponents. I will say, you mentioned before, Geneva did get tested a little bit by Burlington Central in the second round, and I do like teams that have been challenged a little bit, early in the playoffs, and they're able to kind of get through it. Batavia had that thing in the second round as well. Now, does that mean that Cary Grove can't win Saturday? Absolutely not. But I do think that is a benefit to Geneva that they have had that tough game early in the playoffs, that they can take them into this matchup on Saturday. Obviously it's going to be a tough slog. I mean, if a team beat you 41-7 the previous year, that team's doing a lot of good, and Cary Grove's done a lot of good. They've won something crazy, like 18 or 19 straight games or something like that. I mean, and obviously they have a lot of success in the playoffs. I mean, I've seen them do great things in the playoffs. So a very tough opponent for Geneva, but I do like the way Geneva is playing right now. So just curious to see if they can, I think that they're going to close the gap from last year. I'm just not sure if it's a close the gap and win the game type scenario. So, we'll see about that one. Another game on Saturday, game that you're going to be at, Batavia looking to try to get back to state, playing at Lincoln Way Central, another rematch from last year. On this side, Batavia beat Lincoln Way Central pretty handily in the second round last year. They do have to go on the road to Lincoln Way Central. Never easy to do that, but man, I really like the way Batavia is coming together right now.
Yeah, I think Batavia just has everything, kind of meshing together right at the right point of the season, which is, of course, in the playoffs. They just have a lot of things that are, really working from them. We mentioned, the two quarterback system, that's been working in its own way. Nathan Whitwell has been working really well. The wide receivers have been, kind of showing up in the playoffs as well. We've mentioned Brett Berger and Isaiah Brown had back-to-back or has had touchdowns in all three of the contests this year or in the playoffs. And, the defense, of course, has been showing up as well. From the defensive line, just putting all of the pressure on the quarterback, to the linebackers being a great middle ground between the defensive backs and the defensive line. And then you have the defensive backs who have, just been pretty much all over the field throughout the entirety of the playoffs. And, it's looking really great for Batavia. And, it's going to be interesting to see what the game plan is against a team like Lincoln Way Central to try and secure their trip back to normal Bloomington next week.
Yeah, I mean, for Lincoln Way Central side, I mean, the game's got to start with they need to put Batavia in situations where the quarterback needs to make some plays. They can't put them in the third and short, because that's what Batavia was in quite a bit. And, it starts with Nathan Whitwell. So what are they going to do with that? I really don't know. I mean, like I said, Batavia, they got it all going right now with Whitwell, their defense, and now their quarterbacks are making plays when they need to. They made plays a couple of weeks ago when they needed to as well. So we'll see. I mean, something tells me we're going to be talking about another Batavia Mount Carmel game a week from now, but we'll see how things break down. In 8A, I mentioned previously in the podcast, York, this is their third year in a row in the semifinals. They fell short the last 2 years against Loyola. This time they're going to be going to Naperville Central, a game on Saturday night. It's kind of exciting. Saturday night football game. You got one as well with Batavia. But, I've got to see both of these teams in the playoffs, and York, I mean, they're on a roll, but Naperville Central playing really well. They have a very good defense. They have a good running back. Sebastian Hayes, their quarterback, great story. I mean, he's a kid that tore his ACL the first game of his sophomore year, and then before his junior year. So he missed both his sophomore and junior years, and he's back now as quarterback for Naperville Central. Deshaun Williams, their senior receiver, going to Indiana State. He's a transfer from St. Francis. He had 2 touchdown catches against Lyons Township last week. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a game that, Lyons was really not able to run the ball very well against Naperville Central. And York, I mean, Bruno Masso can make plays throwing the football, but they really like to run a football with him, Jimmy Connors, and Henry Duda. Are they able to continue to do that, what they've been able to do so far in the playoffs against a very good Sorry, my house phone rings probably once a week, and it's during this podcast. So, can they continue to do that? And on the other side, Naperville Central, this is the first time they're in the semifinals since 2013. Are they able to continue to do what they've been able to do in the playoffs? So, a good matchup on Saturday night. That's a game that could easily go either way, I think.
Yeah, most definitely.
I mean, Naperville Central has had, a couple of really good victories against some pretty good opponents throughout, the playoffs this year. I mean, 2 weeks ago, they shut down Johnny O'Brien and Friends to get that 31-28 victory. Last week, shutting down Lions, who, of course, has beaten York before, holding on to only 7 points. They have a lot of momentum on their side. But at the same time, York is just running through everybody that they have faced throughout the playoffs. I mean, Edwardsville, Oswego, we talked about how good their defenses were, and they just ran through them like butter. You've got, obviously their win last week where they did the exact same thing. So, I've mentioned matchups like this before. It's going to be a battle between an immovable object in Naperville Central's defense and an unstoppable force in York's rushing offense, and it's going to be another matchup where it's going to be who's going to win it, and I'm really excited to see which side prevails.
Yeah, York's head coach Don Gelsomino, after that second round win over Oswego, he joked me. He's like, "Keep picking against us," and I told him, like, I'm not going to do it, and I will not do it. I picked them last week. I'm going to pick them again this week. That's nothing against Naperville Central, but just the way York is playing right now, I really like their chances. And again, I mean, they got to the semifinals last couple years, but they ran into that. I mean, Loyola was just such a that was a big mountain to climb to be able to beat Loyola. But I think this is the year that, is this the best York team in the last 3 years? I'm not sure, because they had really good teams, but I think this is their best opportunity to get through and play in the state championship game. So we'll see what happens there with York. And then the last game this weekend involving teams in our area, Montini plays Wilmington. A matchup. Wilmington is actually the defending 2A state champion. Montini has already beaten the defending 3A state champion. And Byron, Wilmington's going to Montini. Montini is a program that, if you look at IHSA record books, like from 2009 and 2018, they were in the state finals 8 times. They have not been back to the state finals since 2018. I know they want to get back there very badly. Wilmington will be a tough challenge. Wilmington has just rolled over every team that they play, running the football, playing good defense. I will say that Wilmington, their number 2 running back, he was hurt early in the first quarter of their previous game. So that's sort of a development to watch going into the playoffs. Going into this game, it's going to be tough for Wilmington either way, even if they're full strength against that Montini defense. The Montini defense is really good. Did a great job against Byron, but it's a fun match. If Byron was Montini's toughest test of the playoffs, this is probably number 2 with Wilmington coming to Montini. Good for them to get both of the games at home.
Yeah, definitely.
And you mentioned it, Wilmington losing Kyle Farrell, I believe, on the first play of that game they played last week. It's definitely a big blow to them, especially if he can't play in that game against Montini. But, it's going to be a really great matchup. We've mentioned Montini's defense for the past couple of weeks and how good they've been and grinding out those victories, especially against Byron, a couple of weeks ago. And, it's going to be a really big battle. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's a defensive battle once again that Montini has to come out on top of.
Yeah, no doubt. Like we talked about that St. Francis game, high scoring. I think this might be low scoring in this game with the way that both of these defenses play. So it'll be a 40-39 final. We'll see what happens. But
we might jinx them again.
Yeah, we might jinx them again. A lot of good football this week. A lot of good stuff on Friday Night Drive. We're going to have previews coming out in the next couple of days. I'll be back here tomorrow with Steve Susi as we break down 1A through 8A. Then, of course, we'll be at games on Saturday this weekend. All the games on Saturday this weekend. So, again, Joel, any thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm excited
to be back watching football, and this week is sure to be a fun one once again.
A lot of fun. Again, for Joel Boenitz, this is Josh Welge. Thanks again for joining us.